Our next guest is someone that most of you know who he is, television host on PBS, Steve Adubato. And Steve's big thing, he has several books, and Steve's big thing is leadership. And on the leadership front, he feels that LeBron James, the NBA superstar, is dropping the ball. Good afternoon, Steve. How are you?
I am great, my good friend Dominic. It is an honor once again to be with you. And, yeah, let's talk leadership. Let's talk LeBron James and some other public figures who are showing an incredible lack of leadership, in my view. You want to start with the king, if you will?
Okay, but first tell us, in your opinion, and you know I'm your biggest fan. I think that you do outstanding work. Who are you taking issue with in terms of leadership? We know LeBron James. Who else?
Yeah. Well, I'm also taking a very clear I'm going to send a very clear message about New York Governor Mario Cuomo. Excuse me. The late one of the greatest interviews I ever did was with a Freudian slip. One of the greatest interviews I ever did because of him was Mario Cuomo. And I respect the Cuomo family. I'm friendly with Chris over at CNN, but I have to tell you, last time I was with you, Dominic, I mentioned that I thought Andrew Cuomo really showed a tremendous lack of leadership on the nursing home front, the decision that was made to send people back early on in this pandemic who died unnecessarily in those nursing homes, and then not only wouldn't acknowledge or admit it, but then undercounted the numbers, Department of Health undercounted the number of people who died and didn't seem to have a problem with them, what's really bad, Dominic.
Okay, so let's start.
He took a $5 million, but I'm sorry for interrupting. He took a $5 million from the book deal and never even mentioned this. That's the biggest problem I have. It's irresponsible. It's wrong.
Okay, so we'll come back to Cuomo. You're dead on in terms of your assessment, dead on correct. Let's start with King James. What are you taking issue with here?
So here's the thing. I tremendously respect LeBron James, not only because he's the greatest basketball player out there now, and I enjoy watching him play. He's a team leader. He brings people together. He spoke out on issues of social justice, racial inequities, all really powerful, important things. And here's what happens on the COVID front. A, he breaks the protocol, and the NBA doesn't have the leadership or the courage to do anything about it. He was out at a social event, and he was asked, did you take the vaccine? And his response was that that's a personal matter. I don't want to discuss it. Here's my problem with that. He has been so committed to the African-American community, has helped so much. The African-American community is so far behind in terms of the vaccines. You have any idea, Dominic, and I know you know better than most, if LeBron James had simply said, yes, I took it, and here's the message I want to send to others, particularly in communities that are black and brown, and here's why we need to save lives, it would have been great. And by the way, if he didn't take the vaccine, he has a responsibility to say why. Now, he says it's a private matter. Is it really a private matter when you make yourself so public on so many public issues, particularly those affecting the minority community, all of a sudden on this one, life and death, he doesn't want to talk about it. It's private. I find it to be inconsistent, hypocritical, and a lack of leadership.
You know what, Steve Adubato? When a person is right, they're right. And the point that you're articulating is 1,000% dead on, especially when you consider what happened in Ohio, that tragic fatal police shooting of that teenager in which she was holding the knife. And unfortunately, the officer had to use deadly force. But Mr. James immediately tweeted out that night and then took it down that officer was next. And that puts now this was right around the time of the verdict in the Minneapolis trial, the George Floyd trial, but it put the officer's life on the line. And so Mr. James took what he felt was immediate leadership. I would disagree with him on that, but he did it there. But like you're saying, not on the vaccine.
So here's the thing. I don't know whether he was right or wrong in saying what he did in that case, but putting a police officer's life or safety at risk is irresponsible. He was very quick, Dominic, to speak about that. I would say this. 15, 16 months into this, a vaccine available for all this time, okay, it's his private business. The problem is the minority community looks to leaders, and I would argue mostly medical physicians, clinicians, infectious disease experts, but yes, also celebrities and public figures and former President Barack Obama. All of a sudden, All of a sudden, Dominic, you find LeBron James, he's mute on this. He's quiet. He's silent. It's a private matter. No, it's not. If you're going to speak out so publicly and in some cases not so responsibly and quickly, you had all this time to think about this vaccine and it's such a private thing? No, not when people's lives are at stake because they would follow you. And by the way, there's no rational or medical reason why not to, but it's his choice not to, but he's not to not talk about it, if that makes any sense. You have to talk about it if you're the leader the way he is.
And so the conversation is with Steve Adubato, the television host, PBS host, longtime PBS television host. The bottom line, to your point, and even before this happened, your thing is that this reflects leadership or a lack thereof of leadership.
And that's right. And by the way, when former President Trump took the vaccine, I was critical because he did it so privately, he and his wife. It's absolutely their right to take it or not take it, do what they want. Here's the problem. Millions and millions of people, many, many listeners at 77 WABC follow, respect, and listen to the president. So who, to his credit, later on, he did say, I took the vaccine. Would I have liked to have seen him do a public service announcement similar to what Chris Christie has done on the vaccine? Yes. Do I think it would have made a difference? Yes. I expect more from our public leaders, whether it's Chris Christie, LeBron James, Governor Murphy, former President Trump, President Biden, et cetera. I expect more, not perfection, but consistency and integrity, and I don't always see it.
So you mentioned Governor Murphy in New Jersey. Let's talk about him for a second.
Sure.
You are all things New Jersey and all things New York. Governor Murphy, how is he doing in your opinion? We know that he just recently changed the COVID restrictions. Do you, in your opinion, Steve Adubato, television host, in New Jersey, are things coming back to normal?
Here's the problem, Dominic. Look, for me to say here's what I would have done if I'm a governor is so irresponsible because I don't have all the information he has. But here's my concern about the governor, and I look forward to a one-on-one interview that his office has been promising for a long time, and I'm confident will finally happen. I do want to ask him about, quote, following the science. I do want to ask him if it was about what the CDC said, and we should follow the CDC as a scientific and healthcare experts, why he didn't go along with them early on. Yes, he is moving forward now. Some might argue it's too late, but I'm going to say this. He needs to be, in my view, more empathetic and compassionate to the businesses that have lost their business, those who are struggling now, to school-age children and their parents who very much want their children back in school. And, boy, they better be back in school in September or 5 days a week. Or, Dominic, I'm telling you, this gubernatorial race, New Jersey is a very Democratic state, but if our kids are not in school in September 5 days a week, Governor Murphy's going to have a problem because there's going to be no rationale and no science behind that. So overall, I give him a B-, C+. But finally, last point on this, I don't agree with what he did on the nursing homes, comparable to Governor Cuomo. No, he didn't undercount it with his Department of Health. But I will say, and he didn't write a book on leadership and happened to accidentally leave that part out. But I will say this, when I sit down with him, I'll ask him very specifically, did you make a mistake in retrospect in sending people back with COVID out of nursing homes to hospitals, back into nursing homes without being sure that they were safe? Last time I interviewed him months ago, final point, he said, the nursing homes told me it was safe. No. Trust, but verify. That's what great leaders do.
Absolutely. We're talking to Steve Adubato, television host, PBS. Steve is an expert, all things New York, all things New Jersey. And so let's now come full circle back. The theme right now is leadership. And so when it comes to leadership, where do you put Cuomo in? Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York.
Let me just say this. The last book I wrote was called Lessons in Leadership. Rutgers University Press. Didn't make a lot of money on it, but I'll tell you what, it didn't matter to me because my job was to talk about the lessons I've learned in leadership. Dominic, half of that book, Lessons in Leadership, and please go on our website to check it out if you want to buy it. I got to tell you something. Half the book, Dominic, is about mistakes that I made as a leader and learned from those mistakes. I run a small nonprofit. We run a production company. We run a leadership development company. I have lost count of the number of times I've lost my cool in meetings handled things the wrong way, made bad decisions, let my emotions get in the way, my ego, whatever it is. That book is filled with my mistakes and the lessons I learned from those mistakes as a leader and what I want to pass on to others. I've got Governor Cuomo's book when it came out. It actually has a very similar name around leadership and the lessons he learned. There's not one word about this nursing home scandal. Not one word saying that he looked back and realized he made a mistake. Doesn't even mention it. The cover-up is disgusting when you talk about undercounting people who lost their lives in nursing homes. And then, at least to me, I think he implied it doesn't matter where they died. Well, it sure does, particularly those families. I give him a D as a leader on this. Yes, he was good in those press conferences, handles himself very well in public, but that's not all a leader is, a very articulate, savvy communicator. You have to be consistent, have integrity, and on this issue, on the nursing home issue, then taking $5 million for that book, I got a problem with it, Dominic Carter.
Steve Adubato, we're talking to. Steve, the part that bothers me in terms of this nursing home thing, and it's very hard for me to talk about it because I get emotional when I think about it. Let's face it. You're in your prime. I'm 57. Sooner or later, we're going to get older, right? It's going to be sooner rather than later. And you and I, no matter what we've done in our careers, we will be in the same exact positions as those senior citizens that are victims, and that their family members could not even come to their aid. They had to basically die alone, absent maybe a nurse or a doctor that was there with them. And so that's the part that gets me the most in terms of, $5 million for writing a book, and now you're open to a possible criminal investigation.
See, Dominic, by the way, I got a couple years on you, which you just reminded me of, what we may be facing down the road. But I'm going to tell you something, man. I got to tell you, this is the part. I don't put their deaths at the door of Governor Cuomo. He's responsible for those deaths. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, in retrospect, it was a bad decision. It was a decision not based on what he knew for sure, very confident, trust but verify, that those people would be safe when sent back into the nursing homes. A, that's a mistake. B, he not only doesn't acknowledge it, he says, quote, I did nothing wrong. To rub it in the faces, I don't believe it's his intent. But if you're on the other end and you're a family member, Dominic Carter, and he says it doesn't really matter where they died and then makes money on a book about leadership during COVID and doesn't mention it, it feels, and I believe he's a compassionate and empathetic person. I respect the Cuomo family tremendously. It doesn't show an iota of compassion or empathy for those people. And frankly, him saying again and again, I did nothing wrong, and not acknowledging the pain of those people, then undercounting almost by half the number of people who died in New York nursing homes because it might look bad? Nah, not okay. And it makes it worse for those families because it's already painful to lose a family member, but not to sense that the leaders who are in charge don't feel it, don't acknowledge it, or underplay it. Not okay.
Steve Adubato, television host, PBS. Your big thing is leadership. You have a number of books out, and I just want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I do want to say this. I look forward to chatting with you in the future because you are an expert at the body politic in terms of politics, and I do look forward to you joining me again once Governor Murphy sits down with you. I don't see how he gets around. How do you get around the number one reporter in a state and you haven't done a recent one-on-one? How do you do that?
Let me just say this. I don't know if I qualify to be that number one journalist in New Jersey, but I'll say this. I am going to do what you would do, Dominic. I would ask direct questions in a respectful way. Mm-hmm. I don't have any horse in the race. I love when people say, I actually don't love, whose side are you on? Are you with Trump or are you with the other side? Are you with Murphy or the other side? There's only one side, the side of truth. And I'm going to ask the governor direct questions about that nursing home situation. If he doesn't give me a direct answer, I will respectfully follow up and make it clear that he didn't, and then people can decide for themselves. That's what our job is, not to advocate for certain politicians or certain people we like or don't like, or lie about an election or play games as to whose side we're on. That's not our job, Dominic, and that's why I respect your show, because you don't have a horse in the race other than your audience and providing legitimate, accurate, credible information. That's our job.
Well, brother, I couldn't have said it any better myself. The great Steve Adubato, thank you for joining us. We look forward to chatting with you again in the future.